Let me make a prediction here. China's economy will collapse by the end of this year, or in the first quarter of next year. There'll be this tragic break in the economy, where all the economic indicators just crash down all at once, so fast that nobody has time to even react. But, up to this moment, the October economic data has already come out one after another, and the facts are right there in front of us. We don't even need to wait until next year's first quarter. Right in this fourth quarter of the year, the economic break has arrived right on schedule. And history has told us over and over again that when a tragedy like an economic break hits, relying on the central bank to just print money out of thin air doesn't do a damn thing positive. Let me put it this way, if printing money out of nowhere actually worked, the Chinese people would still be using the gold yuan coupons issued by the Nanjing nationalist government today. Venezuela and Argentina would be world-class industrial powerhouses right now, and Zimbabwe would be the richest country on the planet. Let's take a look at the October economic data released by the CCP. First off, a quick reminder to everyone. All this data has been polished and prettied up over and over by all the different Chinese government departments. It's the result, after all that cosmetic surgery. So when even this repeatedly touched-up data shows signs of collapsing, the real economic situation is actually way more brutal than anything you can imagine. First things first, you all need to get a basic idea straight. In the first 3 quarters of this year, China's economy managed to stay roughly stable because the central bank was printing money out of thin air through outright reverse repos. Outright reverse repo means the Ministry of Finance issues government bonds, pretends that the big commercial banks are buying them, and then in just a few seconds after they buy them, sells them straight to the central bank. The term is 3 to 6 months, and when it comes due, the big commercial banks are supposed to buy them back. But in actual practice, the central bank keeps rolling them over at maturity, buying even more bonds from the big commercial banks, so there's really no need for the banks to actually buy them back. That's how the Chinese central bank has been printing money out of thin air to keep the economy stable for a short time. As of mid-November this year, the central bank has already printed 6.6 trillion yuan this way, and breaking through 7 trillion by year's end won't be any trouble at all. This money has flooded the capital markets, pushing the A-shares into a fake bull market in the first 3 quarters of the year. Let me stress this again, the money the central bank prints out of thin air doesn't go into the real economy, it doesn't enter the actual economic circulation system, so in all of human history no dynasty, no country, has ever been able to save its economy just by printing money out of nowhere. I can give you an example from right around you to explain this. Take the money the Chinese central bank is printing out of thin air right now. It's mostly used to push local infrastructure projects. This money gets allocated directly to local governments through central fiscal transfers. For local officials, this money comes way too easy. Back in the day, the corruption rate on local infrastructure projects was 70%. That means out of a nominal 10,000 yuan investment in a project, only 3,000 yuan actually went to the project, and the local officials pocketed 7,000 yuan in dollars. And dan. Now that the central government is printing money out of thin air to push infrastructure, the corruption rate has to hit 95%. So out of that nominal 10,000 yuan investment, only 500 yuan actually goes to the project, and the local officials have to skim off 9,500 yuan. If you do the math on that ratio, out of the 6.6 trillion yuan the central bank has printed out of thin air, only 5% ends up in the circulation system. That's just 330 billion yuan. The rest of it all turns into officials' villas, cash stashed in basements, Bitcoin, underground funds for stock market manipulators, offshore investments. This money is exactly the kind that doesn't enter China's economic circulation system, doesn't become the positive cash flow that supports the economy. The rule of history is this. Propping up the economy by printing money out of thin air can only last about a year at the limit, and counting from July 1st last year, when the CCP central bank first started printing money out of thin air to buy government bonds, up to this very moment, that time limit has already arrived. It's even gone over by 2 months. The central bank has more than finished its job, and China's economy after October has to enter the final breaking point. Next, let's go through and check the real quality of China's economy item by item, and see just how brutal this economic break is. The first thing to look at, of course, is the most important government fiscal revenue and expenditure data. After all, the red elites have always run the government like a for-profit business, and in their eyes, unbalanced fiscal revenue and expenditure is the biggest problem. I'll give you the overall data first, then break it down to monthly details. First, pay attention to the fiscal deficit data. By the end of October this year, the full-caliber fiscal deficit was 857.54 billion yuan, which actually shrank by 26.41 billion yuan compared to 883.95 billion at the end of September. This kind of month-over-month shrinkage in the fiscal deficit is really interesting. It means there were some very telling changes in the fiscal revenue and expenditure issues in October, worth digging into seriously. In other words, we have to zoom in further to the monthly level and look at the changes in fiscal revenue and expenditure each month. Before May, fiscal revenue looked really bad. 4 out of 5 months had negative year-over-year growth. After that, the red regime's desperate drain the pond to catch the fish approach of crazy tax hikes finally kicked in, and the fiscal revenue situation improved, obviously. From June to September, there were 4 straight months of positive growth. But by October, this doomsday tax hiking measure started losing its effect. The October revenue growth turned negative again. It wasn't a big negative, just 0.6%, but this was under the background of across-the-board hikes in VAT, consumption tax, personal income tax, and Social Security taxes. That means 2 really scary things. First, even when the Chinese government is using extreme measures like killing the goose that lays the golden eggs or digging 3 feet into the ground to boost revenue, it still can't achieve revenue growth. Heading into the fourth quarter, the water source has completely dried up. No more oil to squeeze out. Second, from here on, the drop in fiscal revenue will keep getting bigger, and soon it'll exceed double digits. The whole country's finances can only barely hold on purely by relying on the central bank's printing money out of thin air. All the Central Plains dynasties, right before the court collapsed, the emperor and his ministers would push these crazy tax hikes. Even with the land scarred and revolts everywhere, these end-of-days emperors would still choose to tax, taking the last copper coin and the last grain from the people. I bet when you read history books, these scenes feel really weird. Why would these emperors and generals who were all well-versed in poetry and books make such stupid choices? Why didn't they understand the need to let the people rest? Why didn't they treat the people like humans but like pigs and dogs, like livestock, like animals they could sacrifice and trample on at will? But here in the modern day, the CCP regime is still choosing to hike taxes in the middle of extreme depression. That once utterly absurd history is playing out again right now, and the clueless, ordinary people are actually cheering it on as a group, saying things like, "I pay taxes and I'm happy," or, "Even if I starve to death, I'll still thank the party." Seeing this surreal, absurd scene, you should be able to understand those last emperors of the past. On the fiscal expenditure side, October also showed this really weird, sharp contraction, a stunning 19% drop. Since records began, this is the biggest single-month expenditure shrinkage. Just a 0.6% drop in revenue brought a 19% drop in expenditure. This also means that the fiscal system, which has been barely running on crazy borrowing, suddenly hit a cash flow shortage in October. Governments at every level are strapped for cash, and all cash expenditures have to be slashed hard, or else the cash flow just breaks outright. Folks, this is the direct signal that fiscal cash flow is about to snap. There's no way to pull it back. Relying on the central bank's anchorless money printing and printing out of thin air isn't a long-term fix. It absolutely can't sustain the fiscal cash flow, but the foolish Chinese people just won't listen. They only repeat the same line after those homegrown pastoral economists. Domestic debt isn't debt, and the central bank just needs to fire up the printing press to solve everything. I believe the brutal scene of the coming economic break will leave them too shocked to even speak. Now that finances are showing problems, the investment side has to have problems too. After all, right now, the main thing holding up investment data is government-led investment projects. First, you all need to get a basic idea. China's fixed asset investment already had issues in 2019, with a drop of 13.2% that year, the biggest drop on record. In 2020, the drop was 5.9%. In 2023, it was 12.1%. Neither caught up to 2019's drop. Next, look at the monthly fixed asset investment data. In fact, after June, as the doomsday tax hikes really ramped up, the investment data already started looking bad. The ordinary people have been scraped clean. Private investment can't hold on, so it's only relying on fiscal investment to barely prop up the whole thing, keeping the drop in single digits. But by October, with the sharp contraction in fiscal expenditures, the fixed investment drop suddenly widened to 15.5%. That's a huge drop. It's already beaten the 2019 record of 13.2%. If this data holds for another 2 months, the economic break in China will be visible to the naked eye. Next up, let's look at the financial side data, at the monthly changes in social financing increments, because up to this moment, China's economy is essentially a debt economy. Only debt-driven growth is left as the one and only path. When debt itself loses its growth, that means the economic break in China. Right up to July, China could still expand debt, meaning it could barely hold the overall economy together. But from August on, every month's financing increment has been shrinking. 15.4% shrink in August, 6.2% in September. October was even worse, a 42.2% shrink. Debt increments have shrunk for 3 straight months, and October saw nearly a halving. That shows China's economy has completely lost its driving force. The economic break has already actually happened. Next, let's look at the commodity housing sales data. For most clueless Chinese folks, their only understanding of the economy is real estate. Only when the property market is totally crushed, when the commodity housing market is so dead nobody's interested, will Chinese people really believe the economy has collapsed. China's property bubble started bursting in 2021, when first-hand commodity housing sales area hit a peak of 1.8 billion square meters. By 2024, sales area had dropped to 970 million square meters, but a drop like that in sales area still isn't nearly enough. It's not enough to snap the clueless Chinese out of their fantasies, to fully wake them from dreams of stars and seas. This year, especially in the first half, the sales area drop was only single digits, which let a lot of Chinese people's hearts fill up again with idiot-level fantasies. The market's already hit bottom, house prices are about to stop falling, China's economy is about to rise again right away. Too bad. The market quickly gave them a smack on the head. Look at the monthly commodity housing sales data table. After August this year, the sales drop widened to double digits, and by October it ballooned sharply to 20%. From the weekly reports put out by major agencies, the market is still contracting hard. The sales shrink in November is already heading straight for 30%, and by December it'll probably halve. The remaining property companies that are still hanging on were already struggling on the edge of cash flow breaks. Now with sales dropping hard, and December and January being big months for cash outflows, settling engineering payments, repaying loans, even if it's borrow new to pay old, they still have to pull money out of their pockets first to pay off the old debt before they can borrow new. With this reality of sharply shrinking sales, the surviving property developers are definitely going to break cash flow altogether. Finally, I have to rant about the export sector. This year, from top to bottom in China, everyone's been touting export data, meaning that even under the pressure of the US-China trade war, China's export data can still hold growth. In fact, all this so-called growth is just exporters' deathbed struggles, dumping whatever inventory they have left at any cost, scraping together some export tax rebates so they don't lose everything, then packing up the workshop machines and selling them off. At least they get some money for scrap metal. Once shipped out, if they can transship to the US, great. If not, dump it as waste in Latin America or Southeast Asia, no problem. This kind of brutal dying struggle is actually being read by clueless Chinese as exports are very resilient. They think China's private entrepreneurs can pay the extra taxes from overcollection, endure layer after layer of squeezes from environmental, fire safety, labor, health, and street-level inspections, and still resist the trade war pressure to achieve export growth. This kind of nonsense that goes against objective rules, and broad swaths of Chinese people actually believe it deeply. It really makes you wonder seriously if Chinese people missed a key link in evolution, like they generally didn't develop brains. But good thing is, this deathbed struggle in exports won't last long. Once they clear out inventory and sell off the machines, export growth will just vanish with a bang. The change will be so fast it'll leave Chinese people staring in shock. That kind of change already showed up in October. Under customs data, export growth suddenly turned to a real 1.17%, while in September it was still a positive 8.22%. Of course, this also means from October on, China's export sector will shrink at an extremely sharp speed. The last fig leaf that Chinese people used to cover their shame gets ripped off here. Economic rules won't leave Chinese people even a shred of face just because of their collective stupidity. Thanks for watching and joining us on this journey to unveil China's many layers. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with others, and hit that subscribe button to stay updated. See you in the next video.